Hey guys, Zack Mars here, and this is my review of Danny Phantom. Okay, so this episode, Secret Weapons, is about, well, Jazz, obviously established in the Ultimate Enemy movie. Danny now knows that Jazz knows that he's a superhero. So this episode's about that, about how Jazz, now that she's officially knows that he's a superhero, tries to help him as a sidekick in a more hands-on way and fails miserably. And this, of course, causes conflict between the two of them. So, of course, this episode proceeds to open up with Danny, Tucker, and Sam at the movies. And of course, Danny and Sam and Tucker did enjoy the movie, but they also point out that obviously they point out that Jazz has been helicoptering around Danny lately, and points and wonders what happened. But of course, Danny proceeds to point out that obviously he's been using his invisibility to hide so that his sister doesn't see him. And thinks the coast is clear, but it's at this point where Jazz shows up in her car and proceeds to hand Danny a Fenton thermos, telling him that he really shouldn't leave home without one, pointing out that there could be a ghost about. But of course, Danny is insisting that there is no ghost about. But it's this point where his ghost sense goes off and he sees Skulker, and Jazz has no idea who Skulker is, so of course Danny proceeds to explain that he's probably there to hunt him again, which of course causes Jazz to become concerned for her brother's safety, pointing out that it's more than once, and she obviously understands that Skulker seems to be like a serious threat. But and of course he is secondary antagonist, second only to Vlad himself, because they appear the most. But of course, Danny points out that it'll be fine, and that there's ultimately a structure to these things. Where Skulker of course comes to fight Danny. Danny fights back. They exchange witty banter for a bit, and then Danny sucks them into the Fenton thermos and sends him back home. And it's at this point where Jazz of course points out that Skulker seems to have broken formula because he is completely ignoring Danny, which of course Danny realizes is a problem, and he immediately goes to go and find Skulker and figures out why he's ignoring him. And as we find out, Skulker has his own set of things that he's trying to do. He immediately flies off to Axiom Labs and is looking for a thing of bloodstream nanobots, which he proceeds to steal from Axiom Labs. And it's at this point where Danny goes to confront him, wondering what he could possibly want with bloodstream nanobots. But Skulker then proceeds to trap him in a net and leaves. Meanwhile, of course, Jazz is currently taking Sam and Tucker to the scene in her car, and they proceed to tell her that Danny doesn't really need her help, pointing out that he's been getting along just fine without Jazz's help. But Jazz then proceeds to insist that yes, she knows that, but also points out that how much Danny will get done with her help. So she proceeds to fly off to Axiom Labs, where she discovers Danny has since broken out of the net and is trying to chase after Skulker. And of course Skulker leaves before he can do anything. So this of course causes Danny to realize that whatever Skulker's planning has nothing to do with him. He's very visibly confused about that. But in case at this point where of course the next day, Danny is once again still trying to figure out what to do with Skulker at school, and just trying to figure out what exactly Skulker's planning. But it's at this point where Jazz proceeds to walk up with her own homemade file on Skulker, who she refers to as Ghost X, which and of course she proceeds to compile a list of data about a bunch of things, and of course what we find out is that's all things that Danny and his friends already know about Skulker, so not particularly helpful information. But of course she insists that as you know, Danny's newest sidekick, Jazz does need to have files on all of his enemies. So she points out that for the time being, she's going to continue to compile a list of files to be helpful to Danny and try to help minimize things that he has to worry about with his other enemies. Which of course Danny is a little bit frustrated about, but does point out that he's just happy that Jazz is there to help him. But in the same case at this point where After night, we're one particular night on patrol, Danny decides to take Jazz along to show her the ropes about how to catch ghosts, so that she can be more of a helpful thing. With him pointing out that as long as he lets Jazz help, and make it seem like she's helping at the very least. He points out that she'll probably, eventually drop it and let him do his own business. But of course, what we find out is that first and foremost, as a recurring bit. Not only does Jazz not know any of the names of his enemies, instead calling them by something completely different. First case in point, first enemy he fights is the Lunchlady Ghost, who has since started terrorizing the Nasty Burger. She immediately pulls her the Fenton thermos and calls her Lunchabelle, which causes Danny to become trapped in a bunch of rubble as the ghost leaves. And again, she continues to do this for several other ghosts that Danny is trying to catch, and again, learning the right tricks for them after Danny proceeds to fight them. But she just comes up with a series of puns that don't work in the moment, and then by the time she thinks of an appropriate one, she's on the wrong villain. Case in point. She points out that quote-unquote friendly fiend, which is literally just Klemper. She refers that his cold powers are enough to make her stomach churn, which of course Danny again points out right idea, wrong enemy. But in the case of the process, Jazz accidentally gets Danny knocked into the frozen water park things that Klemper has accidentally created, pointing out that he just wants to make a friend. But of course, she proceeds to knock him into a ghost slide, which of course went into an icy slide, which of course just hurts him. So yeah, and then finally they go to fight the box ghost in a warehouse, and she proceeds to refer to him as the crate creep, with the box ghost quickly clarifying that, by the way, because that is literally one of his only catchphrases that he says. He claims that he's the box ghost and meant to know who she is. At which point he turns to Danny and genuinely asks. He has no idea who Jazz is or why she's suddenly showing up. And this time she winds up accidentally trapping Danny in the Fenton thermos while the box ghost is just able to escape. And of course she proceeds to remark that they'll get him out of there. But in any case, they then proceed to go home with Jazz pointing out that was a pretty productive night and they caught 3 ghosts. But Danny is frustrated because in actuality, they caught 1 ghost 3 times. Danny. So, Danny's not particularly happy about the fact that Jazz is trying to help. But in any case, it's at this point where they come home and they see that that their parents have actually installed a new device in the Fenton RV, the Fenton Ecto Converter, which is essentially an engine. That's essentially what it is. As they explain, it is designed to use ghost energy to power the Fenton RV. That's what it's for. And of course Jazz proceeds to wonder if it's safe, but Jack and Maddie point out that they're not particularly concerned about that, pointing out that if they hear screaming, they know it's working. So of course Jazz points out that it's very good that there are no ghosts around. Wink. At which point she proceeds to point out that they know something her parents don't know. It's kind of a sing-songy voice, which Danny points out he gets it, but in the process she accidentally gives him a shove and accidentally causes him to turn on the Ecto Converter with his ghost powers, which of course causes the Fenton RV to just drive off without any sort of people controlling it, and of course Jack and Maddie have to go chase after it. But in the case of this point where Jazz obviously is very visibly concerned and goes up to go and find the Fenton RV before it can wreck into something, and at which point Danny's ghost sense goes off while she's gone, and Skulker appears. At which point Danny confronts Skulker and wonders what exactly it is he's doing, and Skulker admits that he doesn't have time for Danny, pointing out that he's looking for the Ecto Converter so he can steal it. And of course Danny tries to play it off as the fact that he has no idea where it is, trying to get Skulker to leave. But it's at this point when Jazz shows up having found the Fenton RV and drives up, pointing out that he'll never stop it with the newly found power of the Ecto Converter that they installed in it. Which of course Skulker takes, realizing that Jazz just helped him with his goals, then flies over to the RV and just rips the Ecto Converter out of it and then just leaves. With Jazz being very visibly pointing out that she's very sorry that Skulker got away again. But Danny then proceeds to just point out that no, he'll save her the trouble, and then just sucks himself into the Fenta thermos again. So, in any case, the next day, Danny and his friends then proceed to hide inside of the Fenton RV, hide inside of the janitor's closet. They just proceed to, keep an eye on things. They proceed to just kind of get away, as far away from Jazz as humanly possible, pointing out that Danny is kind of getting frustrated about the fact that Jazz is, causing problems by just trying to help and failing miserably. And of course, Sam points out that he can't just hide in the janitor's closet forever, pointing out obviously that he needs to go and talk to his sister, because obviously that's the best way to deal with this. Just talk with his sister and resolve it, and make a good point that he doesn't really need her help. But Danny points out that he's not scared of his sister, pointing out that he's just there for a strategic retreat. But there's this point where he hears his sister outside the janitor's closet and immediately hides in the trash can. At which point, Jazz proceeds to walk in and reveals that she's actually gone through Danny's files on all the ghosts that he's hunting, and does proceed to point out that she's been trying to figure out all of Skulker's known allies. At which point this is where she discovers that Vlad actually has ghost powers, pointing out that obviously she's gone through all of Danny's files, discovered that Vlad and Skulker have been seen working together quite a bit, and wonders why Danny never told her that Vlad had ghost powers. But Danny is just frustrated that she went through her files and starts to point out that she's starting to invade his privacy. And this, of course, proceeds to point out that of course, Jazz just points out that she's trying to help, but he points out that he doesn't need her help, pointing out that he was better off without her, and pointing out that she's getting more in the way than she should be, and causes her to become, and he just becomes very visibly frustrated. But and this, of course, causes Jazz to barge out of the janitor's closet, with Danny proceeding to chase after her, trying to make her feel better. But in the process, he discovers that he's accidentally drawn a crowd outside of the janitor's closet, and realizing he just embarrassed Jazz in front of the entire school, starts to feel really bad about it. But in any case, that next day he proceeds to go to bed and wake up. But and of course, at this point where Jack and Maddie come into his room and ask him if he's seen his sister. And of course, he points out he hasn't seen her since school, which it's at this point where they point out that that's exactly when they last seen her, pointing out that she seemingly has gone missing. And this, of course, causes Danny to become concerned, realizing that he's partly responsible because he made her cry, and does wonder what exactly happened. At which point, we find out exactly what happened. She went to go live with Vlad, trying to claim that she ran away from home. Her father's an idiot, and she's obviously upset about the fact that Danny was mean to her, which is a thing that was as a joke that was repeated from Maternal Instincts, where they did that exact same joke with Maddie and between Maddie and Vlad, but this time it's between Vlad and Jazz. And he does welcome her in once she denounces her father. And at which point, it's at this point where Jazz is revealed to have actually successfully snuck in because it's revealed that she's actually planning something. At which point, it's at this point where Jack and Maddie suddenly get a phone call from Jazz from Wisconsin. Realizing that it's Vlad's phone number, they pick up, and Vlad proceeds to just explain on the other end of the phone that obviously Jazz came to him. And proceeded to point out that she obviously she ran away from home, but it of course points out that she'll probably be living with them for the time being. But they proceed to proclaim that that's an absolutely not. But he then proceeds to point out that they said yes, that he's happy that they said absolutely, and then proceeds to point out that Jazz does get to stay with him. At which point she proceeds to they proceed to refer to him as Uncle Vlad. At which point he proceeds to point out that he'll draft up the adoption papers in the morning. But for the time being, she's more than willing to stay at the house and spend the night as long as she needs. And this of course causes Danny to become upset, pointing out that he's obviously realizing that something is clearly happening with Vlad. But and then decides to leave to go and get his sister back with. Of course, Jack and Maddie proceeding to take full advantage of the situation, and they imply there's going to be some, adult fun time. But then it's revealed that no, because it's a kids show, Jack just leaves to go get the checkerboard, which is really funny. But In case Maddie, meanwhile, Jazz is trying to figure out what exactly it is Vlad's secrets, but and of course, Danny has by this point is led to go into the ghost zone because he believes that Skulker is the one responsible for why Jazz left. Obviously, he didn't hear any of the conversation on the phone, and just believes that Jazz, in an effort to prove herself, went after Skulker. He goes to confront Skulker, who obviously at this point realizes that Danny is not in the mood for some witty banter, and with Danny proceeding to wonder what exactly happened to his sister, and he proceeds to explain that he doesn't know what happened to Danny's sister. He hasn't seen her, neither has Danny, and then proceeds to reveal what he's actually been doing, which is that he stole Technis's lightning rod to steal, which Vlad is not, where we find out. Technis, first and foremost, Technis is not happy about it, but then proceeds to reveal that he actually stole it for his employer, and then proceeds to trap Danny in a prison cube, pointing out that he'll be a gift. At which point he proceeds to leave. And meanwhile, as we find out, Jazz is currently sitting inside of Vlad's personal study, trying to figure out where Vlad's secret lab is. And she does eventually figure it out, but can't do anything while Vlad is in the room. So she just kind of waits. And when Vlad comes out of his secret lab, he notes that she's reading through his old yearbook, wondering why he's in his private study. At which point she proceeds to pull out that she was just looking through his yearbook, and points out that he was obviously very handsome when he was younger, but also wonders why nothing happened between him and his mother. And of course he proceeds to point out that obviously her mother and him never really worked out because the whole ecto-acne situation. But he does appreciate that she is at least sympathetic about the fact that he was never able to make something happen, and happy that he's now seemingly found someone who understands him. He proceeds to pull her into a big hug while she proceeds to remark that yes, now she'll see who hugs last. But which confuses Vlad, but she explains that it was nothing, and he leaves while she proceeds to sneak into his secret lab. And what we discover is that what was implied in his previous major appearance, but is now more so demonstrated here. Vlad did in fact steal the ectoskeleton. It is in fact sitting in his lab, and he's made some modifications to it. And this, of course, causes her to become very visibly confused because she thought the ectoskeleton was lost. But it's at this point where Vlad proceeds to come in and demands to know what she's doing in his secret lab. And he proceeds to point out that he was there to come to the revelation that Vlad is secretly really cool, and she wants to know everything about how his ghost hunting stuff goes. And he of course points out that he's happy she found this revelation, but also notes that the fact that she happened to have this exact revelation in his secret lab is very concerning to him. At which point Skulker walks in with Danny tucked under one arm and Technis's lightning rod tucked under the other. And he proceeds to pass both of them to throw both of them at Vlad's feet, with Jazz, of course, being confused why Danny's there, while Danny's confused why Jazz is there. And of course, this causes Vlad to comment on the fact that seemingly they know each other. Of course, he doesn't realize that Jazz knows that Danny is secretly a half ghost, so he's very visibly confused. But he does pick up the lightning rod and points out that on the one hand, he's of course excited to understand that Jazz's loyalty, but he does point out that his loyalty is in question. He is starting to see her as a daughter, so he decides to test her loyalty and knocks her out with Technis's lightning rod. At which point they both wake up on Vlad's personal football field, where he explains that in order for the two of them to escape, they will need to fight one another, and he displays Jazz inside the ectoskeleton. And then proceeds to reveal that he has in fact made all modifications to it, using the ecto converter and Technis's lightning rod, which previously, the way the ectoskeleton worked is that it drains people like a battery, but Vlad has since figured out a way around that by working the ecto converter and Technis's lightning rod, and converting them into a makeshift battery so that they will have an infinite power supply to run off of. And essentially, that's what it's supposed to do. While Also revealing that he's used the bloodstream nanobots to stabilize Jazz's heart rate so that, nothing happens. Which, and of course she points out that the suit won't wait, that she realizing the suit won't kill her, then reveals that Vlad has a remote that'll enable him to kill her at a push of a button. So that's what the suit is for. But, he's at this point where he points out that the two of them need to fight, but Danny proceeds to point out that he doesn't really want to fight his sister, and it tells her that they should consider trying to escape instead. But what we find out is that Vlad has actually reworked his ghost shield to keep them trapped, to work on both humans and ghosts, so that way neither of them can escape. Which, of course, realizing they have no point to fight, Danny proceeds to tell them that they have to fight, and tells Jazz to make it look convincing. Which of course Jazz proceeds to knock him around, and this of course causes Danny to become upset, pointing out that she's obviously very visibly frustrated about the fact that she's kicking his ass, and pointing out that he's very sorry about how the way he treated her, about how she embarrassed her in front of the entire school, and realizing she's not listening, then proceeds to use his ghost powers to force her into the ground and make her listen. But she proceeds to point out that she was listening, pointing out that she knew that Danny asked her to make it look realistic. And of course, Danny, finally realizing that Jazz is in fact listening to him, does decide to finally play along and make it look like, she is in fact ultimately defeating him, and makes a big play about... obviously, Danny's acting skills aren't all that great, but of course, she proceeds to slam him into the ground and seemingly defeat him. Well, Vlad is very happy about that and applauds her from the stadium, but then asks him, and it's at this point where Vlad asks him to finish. Vlad proceeds to ask her to finish Danny off, but by this point, Danny has fled, using his ghost powers to retreat into the ground, so that Jazz can escape, so that Jazz can kind of deal with Vlad, and she proceeds to try and use the exoskeleton's weapons to blast Vlad, but which really frustrates Vlad, and he points out that she should really remember her place, pointing out that he has a remote that can waste her at any time. But then Danny uses his ghost powers to steal it, and he's unable to do so anymore. And realizing he needs to go in after them, he proceeds to go and confront them. And of course, it's this point where Danny proceeds to mess with Vlad and proceeds to knock him around a bit. And of course, Vlad is very visibly frustrated about how they both turned against him. And of course, it's this point where Jazz, of course, reveals that she was never on Vlad's side, revealing that she only really... that, of course, that she and Danny had a plan to turn against them pretty much the entire time. And to also proceed to make fun of each other's acting skills for a brief moment, which is funny. But it's at this point where Vlad points out that they think they're so clever, at which point he turned into his ghost form and asks them if they were surprised that he's a half ghost as well. But it's at this point where he discovers a note on the exoskeleton claiming that no, they're not really surprised at all. At which point he discovers that the self-destruct sequence has been triggered on the exoskeleton, and he is of course trapped inside the ghost shield with no way out. So he winds up getting not blown up, but he winds up having to evade the explosion with his ghost powers. At which point Jazz takes Danny home in the Fenton speeder, which she stole to go to Vlad's. At which point she proceeds to explain how obviously she understands that Danny was not appreciative of the fact that she kept butting in and not being helpful. And of course, Danny points out that he understands that she was trying to be helpful, but also admits that she's obviously clearly not cut out for the whole ghost hunting. Obviously not cut out for the whole sidekick thing. So it is at this point where they agreed to go back to their original arrangement where Jazz would cover for Danny around the house to make sure that his parents would not find out about his secret until he's ready to tell them. And Danny does return the sentiment, at which point Jazz points out that they could probably use a ghost portal or whatever to immediately go back to the house. But Danny points out that he's deciding to take the long way home, pointing out that he's more than happy to spend time with his big sister and go back home the long way. Pointing out that obviously he thinks that his parents are probably liking their quote-unquote alone time. At which point it's revealed that Maddie has in fact won the game of checkers, and Jack is not a good sport. He's very upset about the fact that he's lost the game of checkers. So he proceeds to fling his checkerboard all over the place. It makes a big mess. And of course, Maddie just points out that nobody likes a sore loser and proceeds to celebrate with a victory dance. And that's how the episode ends. So obviously, first and foremost, this is the first episode where not the first episode because there was the Christmas special, but this is the first episode where Jazz officially knows Danny's secret and tries to help him with ghost hunting, which of course does not work out, and they decide to reach a mutual understanding where they realize that their original arrangement of Jazz covering for Danny so that he can go ghost and fight crime obviously was working pretty well for them up until that point. So they ultimately decide that that's probably what they should continue doing. That's that they shouldn't fix what isn't broken. So but also do proceed to grow closer as a family, because obviously the main conflict is that Jazz was trying to help Danny with something that he didn't think he needed help with, and now they've developed a newfound appreciation for each other because they realize that yes, they can be helpful to each other, and they understand that with Danny understanding that Jazz was trying to help, and obviously Jazz realizing that she wasn't being very helpful. So ultimately that's what the episode is, with them getting closer because they realize now that they don't really need to work together. They can just be a family and just continue to keep their secret from their parents, who obviously are oblivious, and obviously they have not learned that Danny's a half ghost yet. They're still working that out. They still have not. Obviously, it came up in Ultimate Enemy, but that got retconned out of existence by Clockwork, so didn't actually happen. But that's obviously a thing. That's obviously they're just going to continue keeping Danny's secret from their parents. But in any case, that's going to do it for today's review. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Discord. Link is down in the description as well. I would appreciate it if you did that, because we are doing encouragement. We are doing we are doing a Halloween watch-along thing at the end of the month. So please go do that. I would appreciate that. And also be sure and go and check out my Twitch. My Twitch. I stream Saturdays and Sundays. We're streaming horror games all this month, so please go check that out. And also be sure and go and check out my Discord, my playlists linked in the end screen as well. The top video is the most recent one of these, which was Magus Month, which I did to celebrate my birthday. Please go check that one out. Whereas the bottom video is Courage Month. The previous one of these I did, that was a Halloween themed one. And the first one of these I did. So please go check that out as well. But in any case, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!